This is Freedom Investor Radio, and I'm John Pearl. It hit me like a freight train when I realized there was a better way. When I discovered that I could take my future into my own hands. When I realized I could invest my way to freedom. This is what I'm working towards. In each episode of Freedom Investor Radio, we will explore the tactics and strategies used by the top real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. We will learn how you can start investing your way to freedom and take control of your life. Thanks so much for tuning in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Investor Radio. I'm your host, John Pearl, and today I am joined by Brandon Cobb, who is the CEO at HBG Capital and an expert real estate consultant and investor. He's been featured in REI Wealth Magazine and Forbes. He's here to share some actionable advice about using real estate investing as a way to create passive income, how to hire A-plus rock stars, and systems and processes you can use to grow your business. Brandon, welcome to the show today.
Hey, it's an honor to be on here. How are you?
I'm good, man. Stoked to have you on. So Brandon and I met about a little less than a year ago, last January, I believe it was, past January in Los Angeles, part of the same mastermind. And it turns out we both graduated from the University of Tennessee. And at the time of this recording, we just beat Bama. Go Vols.
Yeah, go Vols.
And we just recently caught up in Miami. So I wanted to bring Brandon on and talk a little bit about his business. So Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at now and give us the high level origin story of how you got there?
Sure. My partners and I, we co-founded HBG Capital a couple of years ago. We saw a need in the marketplace to have investments that were built to be transparent for the investor and designed to be insulated against market volatility. So everything we do is predicated on recession resistance. And our ultimate goal is to help investors achieve their dreams and impact those close to them and build a legacy through unique real estate investments that are secured by real estate and generate passive income. Right now, we see an incredible opportunity in the entry-level housing market. So I'm careful not to use the word affordable housing, because when you think of affordable housing, you think of like Section 8 and government housing. That's not what this is at all. It's we want to build and sell or build and rent the most undersupplied, highest demand real estate product in the country right now, which is affordable living, entry-level homes, first-time home buyers. There seems to be a huge lack of that. And so we're vertically integrated. We've got our own in-house construction company, our own acquisition arm, and we see a huge opportunity in business-friendly, high-growth states where it's still affordable to live, which is why we are currently in Nashville, Tennessee, and the surrounding areas.
Oh, that's great. So you guys are developing housing communities. Can you tell us a little bit about the process, high level, the steps you go through from taking raw land and building a community on it? I know there's a lot to that, but from a high level, what are the stages?
There's a ton to it. And here's what I think what you're really asking. It starts with being able to find really good deals. And the way to create, you have to create them. It's too saturated of a market to go to the MLS and find really great equity deals. And the way we do that is first, we identify which local communities are the most developer friendly. There's a big reason why we do business in Tennessee. COVID revealed or unveiled this environment that was already there, but just made it a lot more known. You have business friendly states and you have non-business friendly states. And luckily, Tennessee is very business friendly. We didn't shut everything down during COVID. And just on a micro level, you've also got cities that are business friendly and the council supports the growth. And you got municipalities and cities where they are against it. So we first identify where we want to be. And we've specifically selected counties where the median sales price of the homes is less than what the accumulated averages of the whole area. And we've picked out cities where the planning commission and the mayors want density, roll out the red carpet for developers. It's very easy to get things rezoned. It's very easy to get things entitled. I was talking with a guy actually in LA asking the development process out there. And he said, yeah, it takes 2 years. And I was like, man, how do you convince the sellers to do a 2-year due diligence process with you? And he said, Oh, we don't. We buy it and then hope we can do it. I said, what do you do if it doesn't work? What if you don't get it rezoned or entitled? He goes, we'd sell it and hope we don't lose too much money. And I was like, that's absolutely crazy, man. So everything we do is we put it under contract contingent on adding the value to the land through the rezone or entitlement or whatever. And then we buy it afterwards. But it all starts with identifying those cities. And then you want to go and actually meet with the planning commissions and the mayors and sit down with them. And no one else is doing this. So they're going to be stoked that you actually took the time to do this, which is going to help you later on. And ask them what the vision of the city is. What do they want? Where do they want density? Where do they want apartments? What's lacking in the community? Do a thorough needs analysis of what they want. And that's really what's going to help you because one, they're the ones who are going to be approving your developments. And if you go bring them what they want, that's so much easier than you trying to shove something down their throat. So we do that. And then we just reverse engineer it and go to the areas that they want to see the density. We take note of the changes or the additions to the community that they want, and we bring it to them. Now, once we get to the stage where we reach out to the sellers, we put something under contract, we are very transparent with the seller. We're like, hey, look, how much do you think your home's worth? 350, 360. Great. Okay. If we could figure out a way to give you 700,000 for it, would you be interested? They say, yeah, every single time. And we put it under contract contingent on getting it rezoned for higher density or getting the entitlements in place. And that's really where the value is. That's where it starts from a risk mitigation standpoint, is we're able to build a ton of equity in these deals on the front end by adding value to the seller, giving them way more than what their home's worth, and rezoning the land for higher density. And I'll run through the process because I want to make sure I answer the rest of your question. But once we do that, you take it to the city, you have to get the civil done. You want to make sure that you get your endangered species reports, your geotechnical report, make sure you don't run into rock. There's a lot that goes into that. But basically, you'll have what we call a preliminary site plan that gets created, right? It puts all the homes and the stormwater and the grading plan and the utilities all on this piece of paper. And you present it. And the city usually it'll go to the planning commission and then a council. So it's two different departments vote on it. Once it's passed, you basically are good to go. Once you have a preliminary site plan approved, and there's a lot of back and forth, and it takes a while because they meet like once a month, right? And so you got to make the changes, go back to the next one, then they meet again, and they say, we want to need these changes. Then you go back 2-3 weeks later. So that's why it takes so long, is it's the amount of meetings it takes to get everything that the city wants and everything that you want in that plan. And once you finally get the preliminary site plan approved, now you're at the stage where you're going through the details with the city's engineer and making sure that this is a plan that will actually work. Like, they want to know the specifics on the stormwater drainage, and is the traffic going to be an issue? You might have to get a traffic study if it's in a certain area. So once the preliminary passes, then you go on to a final site plan approved, and that's really where you're good to go. And this is just the entitlement stuff. There's a whole section when it comes to rezoning, but again, I want to make sure I answer your question at the highest level and don't go on too much of a tangent trying to explain this.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I've always been curious about that. And I would imagine building those relationships out, like you said, with the key decision makers helps a lot throughout that process to make it more smooth. So Brandon, I want to backtrack. I imagine you didn't just go straight off the streets, straight from the University of Tennessee into developing housing communities. What were some of the things that happened in your life that led you down that path to get into developing?
Yeah. So if you told me 7 years ago that we'd be building single family neighborhoods, I would have looked at you like you had 7 heads. I was selling medical devices. So I did orthopedic sales, loved my job. I thought I had the coolest job in the world. I got to wear scrubs every day. I got to be in the operating room, got to hang out with surgeons, and I made pretty good money. I was young, love what I did. And then one Friday I got sat down by my boss and promptly fired. And it was so unexpected. I remember this, that was just in shock for 4 hours after that. I was like, why did I just get fired? I worked really hard. I thought I was making good sales. I thought everything was going well. And at the end of the day, companies got to do what's best for them. But that's the moment in time where I realized that nobody was going to look out for my financial security except me. You can be as loyal as you want to these companies, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how hard you work, how many hours you put in, they got to do what's best for them. So I got fired and I got thrown into it. That led me to starting a business I started multiple businesses. Had like a motivational blog. I wanted to be the next Tony Robbins coach. I had a course on how to break into medical device sales. And I was also trying to like wholesale and flip houses. And it just so happened that the wholesaling and house flipping was the first business for me to actually get to a point where I could see some money in the future. So we put this house under contract. We're going to flip it. And I just scrapped all the other businesses and ended up making, I think, like $30,000-$40,000 from that, and just took all the money and invested it into coaching and mastermind and marketing. And that produced even more deals. And so for 3-4 years, we just took the money from all these house flips and just kept dumping it back into the company, growing it. So we started house flipping, and over time, we had a light bulb go off where one day we were rehabbing this home down to the studs. I mean, it can't get any more than that. You have a foundation and a skeleton. And at the same time, we're building a brand new home. And I say building, it was a fire damaged home, and we could buy it for less than what the land was worth. And so we're like, this has to be a good deal. And we're like, what if we just cut out all the black? Got a structural engineer, got the city involved, make sure it was safe, and just reframed. And that's exactly what we did. And we ended up building that house faster than we rehabbed that house. It was like 7 months. And we made 3 times as much money on the new build. And we were like, wait a minute, we can build in less time and make triple the money. Let's do that. And so that was when the light bulb went off. So we started doing a lot of spec builds, a lot of individuals, and we're having to chase a lot of sellers and have a lot of phone conversations and feed the big marketing beast that took to bring all these deals in. And we're spread out, and we're like, man, we're gonna have to hire all these additional project managers to handle all the growth that we want to get to. I think at the time we're doing like 30, 40 homes a year. We're wanting to grow to at least 100, eventually 300. And we were like, what if we just built all the homes in the same area instead of chasing all these onesie twosie spec deals in these neighborhoods? And that transitioned our focus to doing more land development stuff and the rezone. And when we did that, things became a whole lot easier because your project managers are just showing up to one spot the entire day. They can manage way more projects. You can be a lot more laser focused. You have a lot more influence over your purchase pricing when you're buying a ton of materials for one big project versus small little orders for a bunch of different ones. And that's really how we ended up transitioning into doing a lot of this development stuff.
Got it. So now in the past, you've been selling these developments as individual sales, people coming in, buy the houses individually. And if I understand correctly, that model is not working as well these days with the market doing what it's doing. And you're exploring getting into the build to rent, having these communities built with the intent to be rentals. Can you talk a little bit about why that's happening and why you like the build to rent model?
Yeah, it's still working to a certain extent for those that are positioned for it, but the writing on the wall, if things continue to go the way they have been with the construction costs increasing and rising interest rates compressing prices, eventually you're going to get to a very pivotal moment. And some people are getting there sooner rather than others because they have to pay a builder to build their developments where we are the builder. So we control a lot of our costs. It's trending in that direction. Will it continue to go that way? I don't know, but we want to make sure we're diversified and ready for it. So we've started seriously looking at some of these upcoming developments that we're doing from a build to rent standpoint, and at least making sure that it pencils as a rental in the event that, let's say we can't sell these homes for what we want. Like, we want to make sure it works out as a rental deal. So we're very interested. We want to keep the build to sell until it just stops working, but we need to add the depreciation benefits of the build to rent communities. Because when you build to sell, that's great. You make a bunch of money and then you give half of it away to Uncle Sam. And so we think it's going to be a perfect complement to what we're currently doing because we can take the depreciation benefits and offset our build to sell income.
Got it. So you are syndicating these developments. And for those that may be less familiar, it's pooling money together so you have enough money, because likely not too many people can afford to do these developments, or in other cases, purchase apartment buildings or self-storage facilities on their own. So syndications are the pooling of resources together to buy larger assets. So with your model, what are some of the main differences as far as return profiles or anything else that you may be aware of that's different from, say, like an apartment syndication or a self-storage syndication from the passive investor standpoint?
Yeah. So when you're doing a build to sell syndication, there are some pretty significant differences. One is the time frame. Typically on a multifamily investment, you're trying to force appreciate the value through turning and burning units, increasing rents, rehabbing units to make them more valuable. And that takes 3 to 5 years to do. With most of these developments, depending on how it's positioned, if we can buy a development outright that's ready to rock and roll, like we can get in and out in 12, 14 months. That's a much sooner turnaround time. If we're having to do the land development, it's usually 18 to 24 months. That's what we're seeing on the life of these. So the turnaround time is quicker on it. For somebody who needs their money a little bit faster, it might be something to look at. And you don't get any depreciation benefits. That's one thing, because you're building and selling. There's really no point in doing any kind of depreciation. You can't capture that. The other nuance is relative to cash flow. So these multifamily investments, there's usually a quarterly cash flow event, and that cash flow comes from the rents that the tenants pay. With build to sell, you don't have any tenants paying anything. Your only cash flow as an event is when the homes start to sell. So the way we've structured it, and I'm just a country boy from Tennessee, all these crazy complex waterfall structures that people get into, like I just threw all that out the window and said, when the money comes in, we're going to give 100% of all the equity and profits as each home sells to the investors until we pay them back all their principal and their ROI. And then whatever's left over, our firm profits on. So it usually ends up being somewhere around 20 to 30% of the homes when we sell that first batch off that the investors get paid out on.
Got it. So I want to pivot a little bit now and talk more on the business side of things. So let's talk about your team. So I know you work with a partner. Tell us a little bit about how that relationship developed, how you met, and then how you've been able to scale and bring on other team members along the way.
Yeah, met my partner. It was funny. He's the one that actually got me into real estate. I knew that when I was first starting out that I needed a mentor. You hear all these things on the podcasts and in the books, find a mentor, find a mentor. I was a big Tony Robbins fan, and he preaches about that. All right, got to find a mentor. Got to figure out what he wants. So we were the only two that showed up to real estate meetup, and he was trying to get operations set up here. He had a business in Colorado Springs. It was all mostly short-term rentals, Airbnbs. And his girlfriend at the time was living in Murfreesboro, and he wanted to get operations set up. And I was like, how does that look like? What would somebody have to do? And he showed me, and I was like, all right, I'm interested. Let's give this a shot. So I kid you not, I drove just about every single road in Middle Tennessee for about 6 weeks. It was about 4 or 5 hours a day. I can officially, and I've got the map to prove it. And I had a little app, and I would just hit the houses that look like haunted houses, basically, right? Grass is overgrown, and the window units are in there, and the roof's falling apart. And through that, we were able to gather all these addresses, find the owners, and he would pay for the mailers to go out. He paid for the mailers, and I would answer the phones. And that's basically how we got started. It was the acquisition arm that really started everything. That was the key, was figuring out how to go direct to seller and find off-market deals. So that's really how we got started. I can't remember what part 2 of your question was, but
let's talk about scale. Let's bring the scale into this. With the team members that you brought in, you can't just go from doing all this, just the two of you. I know you've got team, and you started partnering with people, eventually brought in created a construction arm of your business to help with all that stuff. So tell us about how that went.
Yeah. So I remember when I figured out how many hours a young, energetic, motivated young man could work. Cause I was always like, let's do it. Like, oh, cool. We need bookkeeping. All right, let me spend 7 hours banging out this QuickBooks course today. Oh, we need a sales rep. Let me go spend 16 hours taking a John Martinez real estate sales training course. And I remember we were building this house, and we made the terrible mistake of putting this house under contract with a buyer before it was built. They were showing up every week and asking questions. And I would think I was managing like 2 other rehabs at the time. And I was answering all the phone calls, and I was going on all the sales appointments, and I was trying to keep up receipts and do the books. It was an absolute nightmare. And that's where I had to just let one area of the business bleed. I was like, look, I got to get this home sold. This is terrible. I hate that we're like 2 months late on the move-in date. And I had learned in a mastermind, and I went to this mastermind afterwards and realized that I needed to hire somebody for the lower dollar per hour activities. And right now that was answering the phones. I first had to do that. We're spending money and we're getting good quality leads in, and we're not able to capture those. And so my first hire was like an office admin, call him a lead take. I call him the director of first impressions because that's a way more fun name. But this person was able to handle the appointments, incoming phone calls, managing the CRM, capturing all that data, and then worked with me, and I would follow up with the leads. That was my first hire. As time went on and we had the same struggles everybody else did with contractors, we said, man, if you can't find it, go build it. So we had a need to reduce risk, reduce timelines, and reduce cost. And the only way to do that was to start our own construction company. And so that's what we did. That's how HBG Construction was born. And things were going great. We were really able to scale. We were able to manage a lot more projects. That's when we hired project managers at this point to come on board and handle it. My partner at the time was the director of construction, and he would oversee everything and make sure all the construction stuff was going good. I was the guy finding the deals. And that worked out well. We were using a lot of our own at the time to do the deals, and that was an inhibitor on our growth. We were probably doing 20, 30 deals a year at this point, and we just couldn't get to the next level fast enough because we had to wait to get all of our profit out, keep some of it in the bank account to have operational expenses to make sure mouths get fed. And then the rest we could dump back into like marketing or coaching or whatever to try to grow the business. And when we had the need to start raising capital, and I probably raised 4 or 5 million from people who were interested in funding fix and flip housing. And so we had 4 or 5 million out, and we're building, and things are great, but we were stuck. We still couldn't get over that like 30, 40 unit threshold per year. And I was looking at the numbers. I was like, man, I've raised $5 million. Like, why is this not working? What do I got to do? And I ran the numbers to build like 100 homes a year, and I would have to raise something like 15 million more dollars. I was like, holy freak, this is going to take forever. Oh my gosh, how do I manage all this? And I had promissory notes. Like I had to play Tetris with people's money. And if I had a $320,000 build and the person only had 280, like that was a problem. So it was like playing Tetris, like everything had to fit perfect, and 30 people's money. And it was a big old headache. And that's when I found out that you could create a fund and you could leverage the money in the fund to go get construction loans. And when I learned how to use this, everything became so much easier because we were able to take a good portion of the 5 million that we'd raised plus a few extra million on top of that, put it into a fund. And then overnight we had access to $18 million in construction loans at a very low leverage. It wasn't high leveraged. And that's when things really took off for us, when we were able to pivot into that model, because it didn't matter if a deal required 320,000 and an investor only had 280. I could pull the money together to make sure it fit and make sure all the investors' capital was being used. And the fact that we're able to leverage it to get construction loans meant more profits, which meant I could pay investors even more money. So our investors who had been with us for a while doing these just straight loans on these builds, they were ecstatic because I came to them and said, hey, I can take your return from this to this. And they were super stoked about it. So that's basically our whole growth trajectory in AL.
Got it. So what about the systems and the processes? So I'd imagine it wasn't all smooth sailing as you're bringing on more team members. What kind of growing pains did you go through, and what was it like building out those systems and processes? And if you could talk about a couple that are key to your operations.
Yeah, so we can talk about any of them. There's a lot, but 2 big ones are the hiring processes. It starts with that. And then your EOS system is probably the most popular right now that I call it. EOS, for those who don't know, is an entrepreneur operating system. Gino Wickman wrote the book, Get a Grip, which is great. It tells a fable and keeps the story interesting while teaching the principles. And he also wrote the science book, which is more data and facts, called Traction. Great book, but we use that in the business. So as we're growing and scaling, you want to make sure that There you go. You got the book right there. You want to make sure that you feel like you're in control of your business and not the other way around. I think most people who start a business, the business ends up running them. And it's really funny because they quit their salary job working 40, 50 hours a week to be an entrepreneur and work 100 hours a week, right? Entrepreneurs are the only ones crazy enough to quit their 40-hour-a-week job so they can work 100. But this system really allowed us to get a grip on the business. And how we use it is we hire based on core values. So everybody gets along in the company. Everybody has a weekly score sheet, KPI sheet, key performance indicator sheet. And to give you an idea of what this looks like, on our project managers' score sheets, they have all the projects listed and then the exact number of days they're ahead or behind schedule on each project. On top of that, they also have to track the number of dead days every single week on the project. How many days are people not working? Those are two key variables in their KPI sheet, right? That tells us, one, how good of a job they're doing, and two, the health status on the projects, right? And construction coordinator has a budget variance, right? And that's really allowed us to be able to measure everyone's performance, because now you can fire or reward based on that performance. And your A+ rock stars, they're the ones that want to be measured, right? If you can't give them something to work for and strive for, you're going to lose them. Like they get motivated by this type of stuff. The other variable with EOS is the implementation of quarterly rocks, or basically quarterly goals. The rocks come in handy, again, because it gives a system for rewarding and for firing based on performance. But these are more important than weekly KPIs, where we have a long-term vision. And think of the long-term vision as being on top of like a staircase. And as you go down the staircase, you go down the steps, and each step is a quarter of a year. And the idea behind these rocks is to reverse engineer the long-term vision into quarterly steps. And so what we do is we say, okay, what do we need to do to get this step? And once we're there, what do we need to do to get to this step? And so we reverse engineer everything down, and then we create quarterly goals that are designed to get the company to the very next step. And everybody in the company's rocks need to be contributing to getting to the next step. Like one of our big goals has been to get our construction time under 7 months. That's like a key variable there, because we want to like limit market risk. And it looks like this year will be the first year where we've actually achieved and hit that rock. Those are some of the things that we use in EOS that's really paid off.
Yeah. And after talking with you, Brandon and I were sitting right next to each other at the conferences a couple weekends ago, and we were talking about EOS, and my partner Daniel and I are going through the book right now and doing the homework and getting on the same page about everything. And it's already helping out. It's already huge. So what about sales? How important has sales been in building your business? Anytime you're building something like this, sales has so many different aspects to it. What are you doing in the selling aspect, and what do you do that's been successful in that department?
Yeah, this is where my career in medical device sales came in handy, because it was a lot less competitive sales world in real estate than it was in medical device sales. So I got to take some of my knowledge and skills and apply it here to really understand how sales works. There's a famous quote out of a book or a saying by Brian Tracy, and there's like a picture of these two racehorses at the finish line. And it zooms in, and one racehorse wins by a nose. And then the next snapshot is it shows how much money the first place racehorse gets compared to the second place racehorse. And don't quote me on this part, but it was something extraordinary. It was like the first place racehorse makes 20 times what the second place racehorse does. And so that's what sales is. So I think the misconception people get about sales is they think that they've got to go out and be this like super amazing, perfect sales rep, when in reality, you just need to be better, just one little bit better than the next guy. And so a couple of things that I'll tell you that I was doing in the real estate world for medical device sales that really helped me was, one little thing that I would do is I would always start the call off building rapport. This is very basic, right? I'm not going to go into how to build a rapport, but I would use a basic model where I would talk about what's your occupation, what's your hobby, and what's your interest. Basic framework to build some rapport with somebody. And then I would always do a really good needs assessment. I think this is where everybody fails when it comes to sales. You can't sell anything, and selling comes to the part where it's the value prop, right? how the benefits of your product match the needs of your customer. And you cannot do anything in the value prop stage unless you do a thorough needs analysis. You really need to understand what their problems are. And you only do that by asking very deep, probing questions. So I would do a really good job on the needs assessment. I would figure out that, let's say, for example, so I asked somebody, hey, why do you want to sell your house? And they say, oh, I am just tired of this spot. I'm moving. Oh, okay. Where are you moving to? I'm moving over to California. Oh, okay. Why are you moving to California of all places? I've got some family there. Oh, cool. You got some family there. What? Are these your siblings, your brother, your sister? Oh, it's my siblings over there. Okay, cool. So you're moving over there to be closer to your family. Any particular reason why you want to be closer to your family? But yeah, I'm trying to get this done pretty quick. Okay, you're getting it done pretty quick. Why so quick if you don't mind? Not to say that we can do it. I'm just trying to understand what you need so we can make it happen. Why such a quick time frame to go out to California and see your kiddos? To be honest with you, Brandon, I'm terminally ill. I've got cancer and I only have 8 months to live. That's a pretty big value prop item. I can build my entire value proposition around that later on. That gives me ammunition to really help solve the real problem. So I'm not talking about buying their house anymore. I'm talking about how I can help them spend as much time visiting their children before they die. That would be an extreme example, but that's how asking very probing questions can help unearth the real needs of your customer. So that was one thing that I did really well, was the needs assessment. I saw a lot of people lacked in that. The second was the follow-up. And this is, I argue that every part of the sales process is the most important, but the follow-up really is where you make your money. Very rarely do you go on appointments and get the sell and sign a contract right there, right? People will do business with people they know and trust and can stay in their ear. That should be the last part of that. Because if you don't stay in their ear, they can know and trust you, but they're not going to do business with you. It's the guy who's there present saying, I'm here ready. And with them, one, I would write a handwritten thank you card and I would leave it in the mailbox on my way out. Don't waste any time, because if they've got other people that they're calling, right, you want to make sure you get that thank you card in there as fast as possible. This was something I did with my surgeons, and I noticed that hardly nobody did this in the real estate industry. And I knew that because I would get significant feedback from sellers saying, you're the only one that left me a thank you card. So that's why I called you. So again, right, only 1 inch better than the next guy. The next thing that I would do is I would get very creative in my follow-up, whereas everyone else was calling, following up, going, hey, just checking in. Did you get the contract? Are you ready to sell your home? I would find unique ways to follow up with them. In my report phase, figuring out their interests or their hobbies, if there was some kind of event coming to town, maybe they were really into cars. I did this one time. There's a car show, and like the tickets were like $20 to this car show, something like that. I just sent them tickets, just sent to them, said, hey, I was by your house today. This is funny. I had some extra tickets. I know you're in the car stuff. I threw some tickets in your mailbox. I'm not asking, are you ready to sell your house yet? But I'm being very creative in how I follow up. And at the same time, I'm also figuring out a way to add value to them and continue to strengthen and build that relationship in ways that other people aren't. So getting really creative in my follow-up and not sounding like everybody else was another reason. Another sales tactic that was really working was disarming future sales resistance. I would always ask them ahead of the appointment, hey, I'm super excited to see with you today. Just out of curiosity, is there anybody else that you need to run this decision before we chat today or before you make a decision? And usually they say, oh, my husband or spouse. I go, perfect. Let's make sure that they're there, or can at least hop on the phone and have a conversation while we're there. Can you do that? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. That's fine. Yeah, I want my husband in on this. Yeah, that way they can ask me questions as well. So figuring out how to disarm that future sales resistance was big. I noticed a lot of people do that. Another way to disarm future sales resistance that worked really well was a lot of people feel bad telling somebody no. There's that awkward moment at the end where like you ask for the business and you have to get rejected and they don't want to reject you. So what do they say? I want to think about it. Thank you for your time today. So I'd always preface the appointment with a phone call and I'd say, hey, just so you know, I'm not going to waste your time today. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to think about it or let me check on something or tell you I'm going to do something I'm not. And so I'm not going to waste your time. If you could do the same for me. If you feel like something is not a good fit today, will you tell me no? Do you have any problem doing that? And it works every time. They feel comfortable because if they give you a no, at least you can ask why. and be like, cool, hey, I understand this isn't fit for everybody. What was it that made you say no? And then you can get that last objection, or the true objection, I call it sometimes, out of that person and actually maybe do the deal. I could go on and on about this, but those are some good ones right there.
Now, those are definitely some good ones, especially for a guy like me with no sales background. I feel like I just got a master's level education on it now. So one thing, I've got time for a couple more questions. With the recession, talks of a recession, are we in one? Is there one on the horizon? Who really knows what we're calling a recession these days? But recession-resistant assets, passive income, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so it means here's a basic way of putting it. During recessions, is money going to continue to flow into those assets, or is it going to flow away from it? That's really at a high level what you need to be asking yourself. Certain needs during economic contractions go away, right? Vacation money, short-term rental markets might take a hit for that. Luxury items, right? Discretionary income disappears, but people still need groceries. People still need a place to live. Now, where they live might change. And one of the reasons why we're building entry-level housing is because that's what's lacking right now. When you have a contraction and interest rates go up, then the need to live doesn't go away. People just pivot into more affordable living arrangements. And the biggest opportunities at the bottom, if you can find the deals to do it and control your costs. That's why we really like entry-level housing from a build to sell perspective. And from the build to rent perspective, again, people always need somewhere to live. And when they can't afford to own something, what are they going to do? They have to rent. They need somewhere to live. My really going to go on this asset, but there's self-storage units, there's class B and C multifamily. The entry-level housing is not just the only recession thing, but those are some of the things that we're looking at. We think that over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, these types of assets are what money is going to continue to pour into, and therefore make it recession resistant.
Yeah. And I mean, if you just look at the data, and I'm going to try not to botch this going off the top of my head, but less than 20% of Americans making the median income per year annually can afford the median monthly payment on a mortgage right now. It's staggering. So there's definitely a market for the build to rent space is something I've got my eye on right now. Brandon, that's about all the time we've got today. So where can people reach out to you if they wanted to learn more about what you do?
Yeah. So if you're interested in learning more about building your legacy, achieving your dreams, and impacting those close to you through unique real estate investments, you can go to our website, hbgcapital.net. That's pronounced Harry, Bob, Gary, capital.net. I joke that somebody stole the .com, so it is a .net. We've got a free ebook on there, Recession-Resistant Real Estate, breaks down everything you need to know, your guide against investments insulated against market volatility. And then we have another ebook on there called 100 Questions Passive Investors Should Be Asking Before Investing. And I compiled the questions in that book because I got a call from an investor one day who was an acquaintance with a friend of mine. And that person lost all of their money to a real estate investor in their market. And I was so depressed after that call because he was calling me for advice on what he could do. And he did nothing right, from the paperwork to vetting the sponsor to vetting the, like, it was just red flag after red flag. And so I swore, I was like, man, if I could do something to prevent just this from happening to one other person, what would it be? And so I wrote that book. So you can go to our website, hbgcapital.net, and grab that book as well.
Excellent. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Cobb, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, man. Enjoyed the convo.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Investor Radio. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks again for listening.